My name is Clarisse, and like most roles I've been given in my family, this one started with a favor. It was late on a Tuesday. I had just finished a long curriculum planning session and was zipping up my bag when my phone buzzed. It was Samantha. We hadn't spoken in a while. Not because we'd argued, just time. She moved fast. I didn't chase. She didn't even say hello. Hey, are you free next Saturday night? Before I could answer, she kept going. It's the Holloway Alumni Gala, the formal one. I'm on the committee this year and I'll be giving a speech. But we don't have anyone to watch the twins. I know it's last minute, but would you mind? Just bring a few snacks, maybe a book or two. Help them stay quiet during the program. They love you, and you're so good with them. It didn't sound cruel. It never does with her. That's the tricky thing about Samantha. Every request comes wrapped like a compliment. You don't have to stay the whole night, she added quickly. Just through dinner, I'd owe you big time. And of course I said yes. I always do. That Saturday I arrived early, 15 minutes ahead like she asked. The West Library at Holloway was lit up from the inside. String lights curled around the stone columns, and a crisp October breeze moved through the courtyard. I could hear laughter floating through the entry hall. Banners hung above the doors, the kind printed for pictures I parked on a side street a block away. Not because I had to, just because I knew no one would be waiting at the front steps with a smile or a name tag. My bag was full. Juice boxes, crayons, fruit snacks, wet wipes, 2 storybooks, and 2 spare shirts in case the twins spilled anything. That's how I've always been. Quiet, prepared, forgettable. The boys spotted me first. Auntie C, they shouted, running across the walkway. One leapt into my arms. The other wrapped himself around my waist like a koala. They smelled like soap and cotton candy. That moment right there was why I came. Samantha followed a few steps behind them. Her gown shimmered under the lights. She was holding a clipboard in one hand, a flute of champagne in the other. Her Holloway committee badge bounced gently against her hip. You're a lifesaver, she said, still moving. Seriously, thank you. She handed me a folded program. Just stay near the children's wing. They added some reading corners. It should be quiet enough. Then she glanced at what I was wearing. Cardigan, slacks, flat shoes. Her voice softened. You didn't need to dress up. You look totally fine. And then she turned and walked away. I stood there for a moment, still holding the paper. There's a silence that happens when someone sees you exactly how they've always decided you are. Nothing more. Then I took a breath and walked toward the back of the building. The hallways were marble cold and echoing. I passed clusters of guests, sipping wine and adjusting their lapels. Through a wide doorway, I glimpsed the banquet hall. Long tables, gold-rimmed plates, crystal glasses under warm amber lights. Name cards were arranged in perfect rows. I didn't have to look to know there wasn't one for me. The children's wing was tucked at the far end. New carpet, low shelves, calming light. It still smelled faintly like paint and fresh glue. The twins kicked off their shoes and threw themselves onto a giant beanbag, already flipping through a book about sea creatures. I knelt beside them, pointing to jellyfish and narwhals, grateful for something steady to focus on. That's when I saw it. Just above the door to the new reading room, a bronze plaque. Simple, familiar. The West Children's Reading Center, made possible by an anonymous gift, 2022. The best stories are the ones you carry home. My chest tightened not with pride but with recognition. I remembered the fundraising calls, the layout drafts, the design choices. I was the one who pushed for this space to exist. I was the one who asked to leave my name off the wall. Not because I didn't care, because I knew it wouldn't matter to the people in that banquet room. They didn't know, not Samantha, not my mother, not anyone sipping wine under those banners I helped pay for. Can we color? One of the boys asked. I handed them the crayon pouch, helped them uncap the markers. Across the hall, I heard applause, polite practice far away. As they colored jellyfish onto hotel notepads, a woman in a navy gown wandered through the children's wing. She paused, smiled at the twins, then looked at me. Childcare volunteer, she asked warmly. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Samantha's voice cut in behind me. Oh, she's just the babysitter, she said brightly. She's great with kids, always has been. She laughed, just a little. A laugh light enough to move on without apology. The woman smiled and walked away. And just like that, I disappeared. Not Clarisse, who graduated from this university. Not Clarisse, who had helped design this space. Not Clarisse, who came early, brought snacks, and remembered the details no one else did. Just the babysitter. I didn't correct her. I didn't explain. I turned the page of the ocean book and helped one of the boys find a better blue for his octopus. Across the glass, I saw my mother by the charcuterie table, laughing, her wine glass tilted in midair. She'd heard it too. She didn't flinch. She never did. And I realized then being overlooked wasn't an accident in this family. It was tradition. I didn't need my name on a wall, but I had built something, and for once I let myself remember it. Quiet doesn't mean invisible. And even in the back of the building, sometimes the truth finds a way to echo. When I was 12, I got a reading award from the county. Most books read in a year. The librarian made a whole thing out of it, framed certificate photo in the local paper. I clipped it and taped it to the fridge before bed. By morning, it was gone. In its place was a photo of my sister Samantha in her ballet costume, mid-spin, frozen in a perfect arch. No one said anything. That was the part that stayed with me. In our house, most messages didn't need to be spoken. Samantha was the bright one, the centerpiece, the sparkle. I was the helper, the one who remembered to refill the lemonade, the one holding the camera while someone else got flowers. By the time I was 15, Samantha already had her own photo row on the mantle. Homecoming, prom, senior banquet. I worked weekends at the public library and rode the bus home in the dark. My mother used to say Clarisse is our smart one. Samantha's our sparkle. She meant it kindly, I think. But over time, I stopped taping things to the fridge. College felt like the first quiet decision I got to make without being edited. I chose Holloway because it was 4 states away. My dorm room was small and a little crooked, but I liked that it faced the trees. I majored in early literacy development, tutored after school, stacked books in the library basement on Saturdays. There no one asked, "Are you going to be a teacher?" like it was cute. No one expected me to perform brightness. Samantha stayed closer to home. She got engaged to a financial planner she met during her junior year internship. Their photo was full page in the same paper that had once printed my library award. I helped her pick the dress but didn't make the bridal party. That part didn't sting as much as the seating chart. I was placed at the kids' table with actual children, dinner rolls in the center, crayons in a paper cup. When I asked why, she smiled and said, "It's just easier this way. You're so great with the little ones." I was 24. Later that evening, a guest leaned over and asked me, still figuring things out. I'd just told him I was designing a reading program for underfunded schools. He nodded, smiled politely, and said, "That's cute." I didn't bother correcting him. After grad school, I moved to Milwaukee and started working for an education nonprofit. Rented the upstairs unit in a small duplex across from a park. Bought an old armchair and a French press. My window looked out over the street. Every morning I drank my coffee in the quiet, watching buses roll by. And kids walked to school. It wasn't flashy, but it felt right. I sent birthday cards, brought homemade cookies when I visited, showed up early to slice fruit at brunch. None of that changed, but I noticed something else. Did no one really ask what I was working on? Once I offered to help pay for tutoring when Samantha's daughter was struggling with reading. I thought I was being helpful. She told my mom I was overstepping. "She thinks she knows everything just because she reads research," she'd said. After that, I stopped offering, started showing up with safe gifts, a tea towel, candles, truffles in a gold box, things that didn't make anyone feel small. By 30, I'd served as interim director for our early learning center, helped co-develop a digital reading tool that reached over 200 classrooms. I wasn't well known, I wasn't doing TED Talks or publishing in glossy magazines, but I was proud of the work. I believed in it. My family never asked. They understood baby showers and promotions, not grants or curriculum metrics. One Christmas, Samantha gave me a pack of scented candles and said, "You're hard to shop for. You don't really do anything." She said it while laughing like it was nothing. I smiled and said thank you. That was easier than explaining why it wasn't funny. Then 2 years ago, a professor from Holloway reached out. He was leading a capital campaign for the library expansion and wanted feedback from former students in the literacy field. We met over coffee. He asked if you could design the perfect reading space. What would it look like? I told him. It wouldn't be glossy. It would be warm, accessible, flexible. Kids would sit low to the ground, pick their own books, explore on their own terms. There'd be room for nonverbal children, for those still learning to love language. That same week, we started writing the proposal. 6 months later, I moved into a short-term apartment near Holloway to oversee the build-out. I coordinated the layout, the materials, the furniture orders. When the campaign stalled, I made calls to old funders and former colleagues. Eventually, we formed a private donor group. I quietly matched part of the gap. When one last donor dropped out, I covered the difference. And when the project finished, I asked them to keep my name off the wall. Not because I didn't want it there, but because I knew what would happen if it was. Questions, assumptions, gossip disguised as interest. I didn't need that. Not from people who hadn't asked me a real question in 10 years. Back at the gala, the twins were curled up near the beanbags, in the corner of the new literacy wing, flipping through books. Their shoes were off. One of them had grape juice on his collar. I didn't mind. From down the hall, I could hear the faint ring of silverware, and a jazz trio playing something slow. Then a woman passed by and smiled. "Oh, are you one of the student volunteers?" Before I could reply, I heard Samantha again. "She's just the babysitter," she said cheerfully. "Clarisse is great with kids. She always has been." She didn't even look at me when she said it. The words didn't sting like they used to, but they stayed in the air a little longer than I expected. I looked down at the juice box in my hand. Wiped a dot of applesauce off one of the boys' cheeks. No one in that ballroom had asked how the space got funded. No one had asked who designed the corner where their children now sat. That was fine. I'd stopped needing them to ask. The gala was in full swing by the time the twins finished their coloring pages. From our corner of the library, I could hear everything, the clink of forks jazz drifting in from the atrium, and that specific kind of laughter people save for well-lit rooms. It was the sound of curated celebration. One of the boys crawled into my lap and handed me a drawing of a giraffe with square sunglasses. "Do you think giraffes read books?" he asked. I smiled and said only the ones with tall shelves. He giggled, leaned into me, and yawned. For a moment, I forgot where we were. Then her voice cut through the murmur. "Samantha." She had that tone she saved for microphones. "It's been such a gift to serve on the alumni board this year," she said. "And I really believe in what we're doing tonight." The room answered with polite applause. I could picture her easily, hand pressed to her chest, smile just the right size, eyes glowing with practiced sincerity. She was always good at being seen. Near us, a woman peeked into the reading wing and tilted her head toward the boys. "So sweet. Are you their nanny?" She meant well. Most people do. That's the part that stings. Another man, older, dressed like a legacy donor, stepped closer and asked, "Are you at the children's author table?" "No," I replied gently. "Just here with family." He gave a polite nod and walked on. That's the thing about being invisible. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, quiet ways. You get mistaken, moved aside. People pass through the space you're standing in like you were never there. A few minutes later, one of the twins tugged on my hand. "Can I go find Mom?" he whispered. "I think she's doing her talk now." We stepped closer to the main room. From the doorway, I could see Samantha at the podium, bathed in warm gold lighting. Behind her along the wall hung the new donor display. Brushed metal plates in tiered rows, gold for legacy silver, for endowment level bronze for community partners. I remembered reviewing the draft anonymously, checked for typos, approved the layout, the plaque was there, my name was spelled right, but no one in my family had ever noticed. Guests leaned toward their tables. Waitstaff adjusted silver. The dean stepped up to the microphone. She was calm and composed, gray pixie-cut linen blazer, no theatrics. Her voice held the kind of authority you can't fake. We'd now like to recognize the donors and partners whose generosity shaped this space, not just with funds, but with vision, she began. My breath caught. I knew that wording. I'd helped write the speech. The dean continued. One donor asked to remain anonymous during the construction phase. But now that the project is complete, we felt it was time to express our gratitude properly. Silence stretched across the room, not awkward, just still, the kind that lands heavy. I'd like to invite Clarisse Welles to stand. No music, no spotlight, just my name spoken plainly and clearly. I didn't move at first. Across the room, chairs shifted. Forks paused midair, faces turned scanning. One of the twins looked up at me. "That's you," he whispered. So I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to let the moment be real. The dean smiled at me from across the marble floor. She funded the children's literacy wing, she said, quietly, intentionally. And tonight we thank her for her extraordinary commitment to early learning and access. Still, I said nothing, didn't wave, didn't cry, just nodded once and sat back down. One twin leaned his head on my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around him as if nothing had happened. Samantha was still at the podium, hands clasped, frozen mid-expression. Behind her, my mother sat with her lips slightly parted, wine glass halfway to her mouth. They both looked like they didn't understand what had just happened. And maybe they didn't. Recognition had come not because I'd asked for it, but because someone else decided I should be seen. That made all the difference. Later, as the dean moved into closing remarks, the room buzzed again, but softer now. Like everyone was trying to recalibrate what they thought they knew. I stayed in the reading wing, same spot, same beanbag, same fruit snack wrappers in my tote. The boys were still flipping through books, half aware of the moment that had just passed. It felt right. This wasn't about taking anything back. It wasn't revenge. It was just truth. After the speech ended, applause returned tentative, like people weren't quite sure what they were applauding anymore. Samantha didn't come over right away. She knew better. She was good at recovery, probably smiling too big now, probably working overtime to turn the moment into something manageable. But the story had already changed, and for once, she wasn't the one telling it. When I sat back down, everything around me felt slightly out of place. The lighting hadn't changed, but it felt brighter. The voices in the next room hadn't stopped, but they were softer now, blurred, uncertain, like they were adjusting to a new frequency. The dean had moved on. She thanked the board, recognized the staff, mentioned dessert was being served soon. But no one seemed to be listening. Not really. Something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. More like the hush after a thunderclap, when even the birds forget how to sing. Forks hovered above plates. Guests exchanged cautious glances. No one looked upset, just recalibrated, as if they were trying to fit me back into a story they thought they already understood. I hadn't changed seats. I was still in the children's wing, knees tucked beneath me, on a beanbag, fruit snack wrappers in my tote bag. A soft-colored picture book opened beside me. One of the twins leaned against my arm, yawning quietly, blissfully unaware that anything had happened. And somehow, that felt exactly right. Across the room, Samantha hadn't returned yet. I knew where she was, still up front, probably smoothing her dress, forcing a too bright smile, trying to move things along. She was good at that. She'd been managing rooms since we were kids, redirecting discomfort with charm, converting awkwardness into applause. But I also knew her well enough to imagine what was happening behind her eyes. The dean hadn't asked for permission. There was no email, no heads up, no stage-managed moment to soften the blow. Just a name spoken clearly, gently, and without apology. And that, more than anything I could have said or done, had broken the rhythm Samantha worked so hard to control. My mother sat 2 tables behind her lips, still parted like she was mid-reaction. She leaned toward someone, whispered something with her hand cupped like a shield, then glanced toward the reading wing. I didn't flinch, just watched her watch me. It was strange the way a single sentence, one you didn't even speak yourself, could rewrite years of being edited out. I wasn't angry, not anymore, just still. After the closing remarks, applause rolled through the space, light and uneven. The lights brightened slightly. Servers began clearing dinner plates and preparing for dessert, lemon tarts, chocolate mousse, tiny domes dusted with gold leaf. Samantha had obsessed over the final course. It has to be memorable, she'd said on a call weeks earlier. Elegant, but not too much. Just enough to leave an impression. Well, I stayed seated while the boys kicked off their shoes and asked for another book. I dug through the tote bag and pulled out one about moonlight animals. They didn't care about donor plaques or name announcements. They just liked that the owl had glow-in-the-dark eyes. And still, Samantha didn't come. I imagined her standing just outside the hallway, trying to decide what version of this moment to tell next. When she finally did appear, she walked slowly. Her smile was pulled a little too tight, her heels clicking at a measured pace. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me instantly. She stopped just short of the reading area. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, voice low. Her eyes flicked side to side like she didn't want anyone to hear, but also couldn't stand not knowing. I didn't answer right away. I helped one of the boys tie his shoe first. Then I stood, brushed off my skirt, and met her gaze. "You never asked," I said. Her face shifted, not with anger, but with confusion, like I'd answered a different question than the one she thought she'd asked. "But why now?" "Why tonight? It wasn't planned," I said calmly. I didn't ask her to say anything. "You funded the whole thing," part of it, I said. Others helped too. She looked like she didn't know what to do with that sentence. You could have said something. I almost said, would you have listened? But I didn't. Instead, I nodded once, bent to gather the boys' things, and zipped up the tote. The twins were now distracted by dessert trays rolling past the hallway. One tugged my sleeve. Can we go meet the dean? He asked, eyes wide. I smiled softly. Maybe another time. Samantha watched as we turned to leave. She didn't stop us. She didn't follow. Just stood there frozen, not with rage, but with something quieter. A kind of recognition. The version of the story where she was the center had cracked. And the woman she'd introduced as just the babysitter was now something else, something real, something known, and worst of all, something undeniable. As we stepped back into the main hall, the air felt cooler. Guests glanced up as we passed, unsure whether to smile, nod, or look away. One man near the donor wall, a former board member if I remembered right, raised his glass slightly in my direction. I returned a soft smile and kept walking. At Samantha's table, two guests leaned in with raised brows. She said something I couldn't hear. One of them looked surprised, the other intrigued. We took the long way around past the dessert spread, past the photo booth, past the framed gala posters that listed board names and planning chairs. None of them mine. Just before we reached the door, a woman in a red wrap stopped me. Clarisse Welles, I nodded. I've heard a lot about you tonight, she said. I smiled. Not all of it true, I'm sure. She laughed quietly. The important parts are. Then she walked on. Back in the hallway, the twins were tugging at my coat for snacks. I knelt down, unzipped the bag, and handed them each a granola bar. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Why didn't you tell us earlier? I locked the screen without replying. I'd told them things for years, thoughtful things, generous things, careful things. But they weren't the kind of people who listened until someone else was speaking. And this time the truth hadn't come from me. That's why it landed. I didn't stay for dessert. The trays were just starting to come out, delicate lemon tarts, chocolate mousse, shaped like domes dusted with gold powder that shimmered under the chandeliers. Guests leaned in to take pictures before touching their forks. It was the part of the evening Samantha had obsessed over for weeks. I want the final course to be unforgettable, she'd told me. Elegant but not overdone. Just enough to leave a mark. She succeeded, but not in the way she planned. I waited long enough to be polite, made sure the twins had their jackets, helped one of them find a missing glove. I zipped up the tote bag, slowly tucking in wrappers and spare socks, doing what I always did, finishing the quiet work behind the scenes. There was no dramatic exit, no slammed doors, no eyes following me. Just a feeling in my chest I hadn't recognized in a long time. I was done, not angry, not vindicated, just finished. Done trying to explain myself to people who were never listening. Done shrinking to fit into a version of the story they'd already written without me. The air outside was cooler than I expected. That sharp October crispness had crept in during the evening. The sidewalk glittered faintly from the moisture in the air, reflecting the last strings of courtyard lights. I passed the valet stand without slowing down. My car was parked a block away, and I didn't mind the walk. Behind me, the gala continued, glassware, clinking, laughter rising a little too loudly. The kind of strained joy people perform when the script slips. Samantha had likely returned to her table by now, smiling, explaining, retelling. She was good at that, offering a new version before the old one had time to settle. I could hear her voice in my head, already reshaping the night in soft, controlled phrases. It was such a surprise. She never mentioned it. Clarisse always liked doing things quietly. Maybe that last one was true, but quiet doesn't mean invisible. And tonight proved that. At the far end of the courtyard, I heard small feet pounding on stone behind me. Auntie C, I turned. One of the twins had broken away, running toward me with his coat half zipped and a granola bar still in his hand. I crouched to meet him. What's wrong? He looked confused. Where are you going? Home, I said gently. It's been a long night, but you didn't get cake. I smiled. That's okay. I wasn't here for cake. He wrapped his arms around my neck and squeezed hard. You're the best babysitter ever. I laughed, soft, warm. Thank you. Then he leaned close and whispered, I think you're more than that. That did it. Not in a dramatic way. Just deep. That sentence landed in a place I didn't know was still open. I looked up and saw Samantha standing under the archway of the library doors, watching. She hadn't followed him, hadn't called out. just stood there holding her clutch in both hands, frozen. I didn't wave. Instead, I straightened the boy's collar, handed him the last granola bar from my pocket, and nudged him gently back toward the lights. Go ahead, your mom's waiting. He nodded and ran. I stood there for another second, letting the moment settle, then turned and walked the rest of the way to my car. Inside it was quiet. The good kind of quiet, the kind that lets your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, the headlights still off, watching the condensation crawl down the windshield. So many nights I'd driven away from family events with a casserole dish on the floor and silence sitting beside me. So many times I'd rehearsed how I felt in my head, only to leave the words unsaid. Tonight there was nothing left to say. That's how I knew something had changed. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A message from my cousin Ava. That was you, the library, Clarisse. Why didn't you ever say something? We need to catch up. Another came in right after. You've been a low-key genius this whole time, huh? Drinks next weekend. I stared at the screen and then placed it face down on the seat. Not because I was angry, because I knew what those messages were. Not connection, not apology, just realignment. People repositioning themselves beside a version of me they had only just discovered. But I'd been here the whole time. I started the engine, let it hum beneath my hands. The dashboard glowed softly, steady, and familiar. I pulled out slowly past rows of neatly parked cars, past the brick gate with its wrought iron sign, past guests, still lingering in shawls and heels. No one stopped me. No one had to. And that, for the first time, felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight pulling faint lines across the ceiling and the soft hum of traffic down below. I didn't check my phone right away. I got up, slowly made tea, and fed the neighborhood cat, who sometimes curled up on my back porch. The mug was warm in my hands when I finally sat at the kitchen table and opened my messages. There were 4. Samantha. Not sure what happened last night. Hope you're okay. 2 cousins I hadn't heard from since the last family funeral. Just saw your name on the wall. Wow, Clarisse. So proud of you. Girl, what else have you been hiding? Lunch soon. And one from my mother. We were surprised. You could have told us. I stared at the screen, the words floating there like echoes from a different language. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel flattered. What I felt was something far quieter, clarity. None of them had asked what I'd been building these past 10 years. And now that they had a plaque, a podium, and someone else's voice telling them I mattered, suddenly they wanted in. But this life, the one I woke up to every morning, was never meant to impress them. It wasn't curated. It wasn't visible. It was just mine. I answered the email from my board contact first, then reviewed edits on a reading curriculum draft we were submitting to a state grant. I double-checked the logistics for the panel I'd be speaking on next month in Atlanta. I watered the plant by the window. It was Monday, and I had work I cared about. By noon, I stepped out for a walk. The sky over Milwaukee was soft and gray, and the wind had a bite to it. I grabbed soup from the corner cafe where the barista knew my name and didn't ask questions. I sat in the back booth, phone face down, doodling notes for a new app feature that had come to me overnight. No one interrupted. No one asked if I had kids. No one asked about Samantha, and that felt like freedom. That evening, I received one last email. The subject line was simple. Thank you, from the Dean, Clarisse. I hope I didn't overstep by naming you last night, but I've waited a long time to say it aloud. Your vision shaped that wing. The recognition was overdue. With respect, Linda, I read it twice. Then I typed back. You didn't overstep. You gave something back I hadn't realized I missed. Thank you. Clarisse, no signature, no title, just me. I closed the laptop and stood by the window. The streetlight flickered against wet pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime rang out a single note, then fell quiet again. I didn't think about Samantha's text, or the cousins, or the message from my mother. What stayed with me was my nephew's voice from the night before. I think you're more than that. Not because it was new, but because it was the first time anyone in my family had spoken about me without shrinking me. That night, I slept with the window cracked open, the cold air threading its way across the room. I dreamed of book spines and soft carpet, and a room full of children, none of whom would ever know the names I was once called. That was the gift. They would only know what I had built, and never the rooms I had to leave to get there. The library wing opened quietly that winter. No ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press release, just soft lighting, a few new beanbags, and the smell of fresh paint still lingering in the corners. I wasn't asked to give a speech. I didn't want to. My name was already there on the brushed metal plaque, second row from the top. It didn't need my voice anymore. The only announcement was a small flyer slipped into neighborhood mailboxes now open. The Welles Children's Literacy Wing. That was enough. The first time I returned was on a Wednesday, mid-afternoon. The place was calm, just the quiet rustle of coats being unzipped and the soft shuffle of sneakers on tile. A group of second graders had come in from a nearby school. Their teacher, a kind-eyed woman with gray roots and red glasses, guided them toward the reading circle. I slipped past unnoticed and settled into a corner chair. One of the newer ones, wide enough to curl up in, small enough not to draw attention. I watched as the kids peeled off their jackets and began choosing books. They didn't care about the wall of names. They didn't glance at the donors or the brass plates or the neat rows of who paid for what. They just grabbed what called to them and opened the first page. That was the point. Samantha never mentioned the wing again, not in family chats, not in Christmas cards, not even when her holiday newsletter arrived, typed in 2 columns with tasteful bullet points and a photo of her family on a ski slope in Vermont. She talked about her consulting work, her oldest starting piano, a beautiful gala season, but nothing else. And that in some strange way was a gift too. Silence is different when it's chosen. Ava did reach out twice. I replied the second time. We had coffee once in February. It was fine. We kept it surface level. Childhood stories, safe territory. She asked questions like she meant them, but I could see the subtle flicker in her eyes whenever she realized I wasn't going to fill the gaps she'd ignored for years. Still, I was kind. I always had been. And that didn't have to change just because they'd finally seen me. One evening in March, I passed the library just after sunset. The windows were lit from inside, golden and low. Through the glass, I could see 2 girls, sitting cross-legged on the rug, pointing at a pop-up page together. They looked like sisters. Maybe they were. One turned to the other and whispered something. The other laughed so hard she fell sideways and pulled her friend down with her. Neither of them looked around. No one told them to be quieter. No one corrected the volume of their joy. I stood there for a long time. There was a moment years ago when I might have wanted to walk in to volunteer, to be part of the moment, to feel known in it. But now I like that they didn't know who I was, that they didn't need to, because the story wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to them, to every child who would come through those doors and find a world that welcomed them fully, loud, curious, unedited, and to every grown woman who needed to know that you can build something beautiful in silence and it will still echo, maybe even louder. Before I turned to leave, I rested a hand against the cool glass. Inside, one of the girls looked up. She didn't see me, just caught her breath and smiled at whatever she'd been reading. Then she turned the page, and I walked away. I used to believe closure came from being understood, but real closure is simply this knowing who you are and no longer needing to prove it to anyone who refused to ask. If this story felt like your own, hit subscribe to keep hearing kindness echo after heartbreak. You're not alone, not anymore.